Welcome back. This is Election Exchange, a new beginning. We are asking a team of experts from various fields whether whether a possible Modi government with a possible stable majority can strike new beginnings on several issues. But the issue I'm now going to tackle is a hackneyed one, but one that is on the top of the agenda for the new government: a possible drought, of spillover on the fiscal front of unpaid bills, and promises, for instance, the food security. The first year when the food security bill will have to spend perhaps all its 1.3 lakh crore, perhaps. So onerous demands on the fisc, and exactly at that time, inflation refuses to climb down, is at 8.6%. Dr. Gokarn, would it be possible for the Prime Minister under such circumstances to adhere to the fiscal deficit and yet, promote growth?
Well, first let me thank Shankar for correcting my memory lapse on state chief ministers who went on to become prime ministers.
Yeah.
Only one of the five that he named stayed a full term. Let's hope that the precedent that precedent works. And also as a reform, as a sort of precedent for taking the economy and putting the economy onto the growth path, I think that's important. But I think coming back to the point about the fiscal growth dilemma, I don't think we can get away from the fact that there is no short-term fix here. There is no quick repair job, band-aid, bandage, and outpatient, if you will, solution. It's really a matter of putting the right strategy in place. And so even if there is a one-year shock, I think the way to deal with one-year shocks is to have a long-term plan. And if you have the kind of majority that the polls are suggesting and the stability that comes with it, you can afford to make longer-term commitments with some credibility. I think that's the biggest opportunity that the new government will have if in fact these predictions come to pass, and they have to make the most of it. Now the thing here is that when you take a
Dr. Gokarn, are you trying to say that he can kitchen sink this year and say, sorry, I'm not keeping my targets, but I'll be very careful with targets next year and give aggressive targets to himself?
I think when you have when you have a strategy, you've got to lay out the strategy. You've got to lay out the time path. You've got to lay out the specific milestones that you hope to achieve in each year. And obviously there'll be some risk there. But when you have a 5-year horizon, you have to use that 5-year horizon, which means saying, hey, look, we know there is a problem overall. There is a problem with subsidies. There's a problem with government capital spending. Which deals with infrastructure, and there's an issue with tax reform, which links up to DTC and particularly to GST. I'm much more, I think, emphatic on GST. These are the things that we have to do in year 1, year 2, year 3, whatever. Now, during that period, we will have shocks. There will be a drought shock this year. There may be another drought in a 5-year period. There may be another external upheaval, some sort of a financial disruption. Who knows? But if you have a plan and you are able to basically convince people that you're going to stick to that plan, you're going to do the right thing on subsidies, you're going to do the right thing on capex, you're going to do the right thing on GST, I think people will be willing to give you the space to accommodate the shock when it's necessary.
Yeah.
You remember when the UPA 1 presented its first budget, there was a pause on the FRBM for 1 year. But eventually fiscal consolidation did take place. So I think the longer term horizon and you exploiting it to put down very clear goals and milestones and sort of act in accordance with those milestones every year, even if you're doing a little bit of a course correction. I think that's the way to go about this. You can't say, hey, look, this is a 1-year story, there's fiscal correction is needed, but there's a drought coming, or there's something else coming, so let's just forget about it and not worry about the next 4 years. I don't think that's the kind of message that needs to be sent. We have to have a 5-year horizon, we have to have a 5-year plan, not in the way that we've been defining in the past, but a fiscal strategy, and that has to provide the room to accommodate specific shocks like a potential drought.
That we have seen them do that before, and perhaps even for the UPA 1 that could be achieved only because they did not have double-digit inflation chasing them for the past 5 years. In this case, 1 more year of big deficit is 1 more year of double-digit inflation. Anil Padmanabhan, you think he can bring...
Yes, sir. Can I finish my point? that actually requires a separate agricultural strategy. So with every stress point, you have to have a long-term strategy. You can't just say fiscal and that's going to address all your problems. Every problem requires a specific strategy. They have to be interlinked, they have to be dovetailed, but they require specific strategies. I think that's really the priority for the government in the first few weeks or months, is to start to articulate these sector-specific or these stress point-specific strategies which somehow get interlinked. That's really where the credibility is going to come from. That's really where the reassurance is going to come from.
Yeah, Anil Padmanabhan, your take on this? There is a big fiscal mess and there is a potential of a drought. Is there anything new that can be done in terms of at least using the buffer stocks much more actively than has been used so far? Something more active in terms of probably Aadhaar or some kind of identity linked subsidies. Anything do you expect that something new can be done to tackle this old mess?
See, Lata, the one good thing for him will be that sentiment management. I think he has to politically manage the sentiment, which he has partially done with the fact that this government is finally departing. So foreign investors, domestic investors, all stakeholders seem to be breathing a sigh of relief that this government has left. So he is inheriting actually a much bigger fiscal mess than what we are seeing on paper, because I think a lot of the fiscal deficit problems are corrections are on paper and they have been outsourced to the next government by the sitting finance minister. So it is not that they have achieved fiscal correction. But at the same time, like Shubir said, that you have to have a long-term agenda. So the key is managing sentiment. So if I were him or the finance minister, I would be very honest with some kind of white paper which puts everything in perspective, sets out a 5-year fiscal correction plan, and all this is already there. It's not that it has to be reinvented. The 13th Finance Commission report of Vijay Kelkar set out a clear blueprint for fiscal correction. Obviously, it has to be updated. The FRBM, which has been suspended, has to be restored. So foreign investors are smart people. They have seen this. They want credibility. I think the word Shubir was constantly using was credibility. I think that is very, very important. So he knows it. I think Narendra Modi knows that very well. So this budget will not be used to give you a quick fix solution to the long-term problems, but more to managing sentiment, to get that breathing space, because this honeymoon will last for at least 6 months with the foreign investors and with domestic economy. So in that period, he should consolidate and move forward.
That, of course, what new things he will do, we will have to see, because the fiscal mess is going to be definitely the biggest challenge that he faces immediately in the first 2 months in office. And the bigger problem will be tax, Mr. Kanabar. What can be at least the one big thing that can be new, or at least big and different in the budget in terms of taxes?
I always believe that tax is a tail and business is the dog. And you can't have tail wag the dog. And unfortunately for us, in the last couple of years, last 3-4 years particularly, the tail has been wagging the dog. I think what we are seeing really is a very aggressive tax administration. Mr. Modi coined this term, tax terrorism, which was quite amusing and I think really reflective of what mood you see at the ground level.
Can you do something in the first budget itself?
So first is, are you signaling to the world at large that you are stable in your policy? So, for example, the retrospective amendment, the first thing he could do is to make it prospective. Because here was a situation where everybody was aware that a matter was in the courts for several years. If the government wanted, they could have really come out and clarified at that point of time. You can't say that I go to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court says this is what the law is, and then you say, no, but I'm clarifying now that this is what I meant when I enacted the law right back in 1961. It sends a very, very wrong signal. When I go and meet up with investors across the world, if you find yourself in a bit of a quandary as a citizen, forgetting as a professional, to say, how can you justify such a thing? And then, to the point which you made regarding how can you make a fiscal correction, there's such a lot of money which is locked up in tax litigation. Unclogging it is not such a big thing at all. You really need to put time frames on how decisions will be taken. Again, not a very difficult thing at all. And finally is this issue regarding black money, the monies which are lying, what we speak about in Swiss bank accounts. There are a number of solutions on the table. There is a need for a political willingness. And if I just put a practical perspective here, there has been always this talk that you want to get monies back from Swiss banks, great thing. But why would you not enter into a treaty with Switzerland the way UK has done, to say if anybody does not want the names to be disclosed, tax will have to be paid on that money. Okay. And the amount of money which UK has collected runs into billions of pounds. Why would you simply not at least collect the tax?
That certainly looks like a new avenue that
Mr. So there are a number of things which can happen. They are not very difficult to do. They require a political will, and they require somebody who's willing to take administrative decisions.
Okay, so their new paths can be chartered. I believe we are running close to the last 5 minutes. Saurabh, what would you expect in terms of big bang or new that the government can be capable of delivering simply because it has a stable majority?
I think we'll get a big pullback in social welfare schemes. They might not say it as bluntly as I'm saying it. I think the way it'll be couched is that social welfare schemes in REGA, right to food, right to education, I think they'll say that it'll be made more targeted. But I'm pretty sure that in the next 3 or 4 months, we'll see a big pullback in social welfare spending. I think it'll be part of the forthcoming budget. That combined with the diesel deregulation that the previous government has pushed through, potentially with changes to the fertilizer regime, I think there's considerable fiscal wriggle room there that the incoming government will use to pull the deficit towards 4% of GDP. I think that construct is relatively clear in the forthcoming budget. The recapitalization of public sector banks, the government will push the bill onto the FII community and say, look guys, here's a QIP, why don't you come in and participate? A pullback on social welfare spending, I think, will be the biggest bang we'll hear in the current budget. It has considerable ramifications for rural India and for a whole range of companies which have benefited from that social welfare largesse.
Okay. Well, finally to you, Vinayak, the big problem will be infrastructure. I promise to come back to you on that. Anything new that can be done over there to tackle a very, very old problem?
You know, in terms of immediate tasks, I think you're going to see a massive emphasis on railway development. You know, what road was to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, in my view, rail will be to Narendra Modi. Secondly, in their manifesto, they have spoken very strongly about a land use authority. I think that will be a good step so that the whole issues of, you know, the scare that industry has about availability of land, that's going to be big. Third is the resetting of the entire infrastructure financing scheme. I understand that the RBI governor is very actively engaged on resetting the entire paradigm of funding for PPPs. I don't want to get into the detail now, but that's certainly going to happen. So, as I said earlier, a new institutional mechanism to handle infrastructure and clear logjams. So I'm keen to see what institutional mechanism, out of the 4 or 5 choices that I enumerated earlier, I'm keen to see which instrument he picks up to actually push infrastructure.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me, but it looks like me, the panel also at least largely is expecting that a lot of new things could be done, at least in a new way. For instance, prospective, changing the tax laws to make it prospective and not retrospective can be one big signal. Social spending, being made asset creating or well targeted can perhaps release a lot of money. Infrastructure, a whole set of new things that Vinayak has been telling us, and perhaps even something different in terms of using the states more creatively and more actively, state chief ministers more actively than has been done in the past. All this could add up to something new. So, well, when I said new beginning, it was more a matter of hope, but you gentlemen are putting some flesh and bones into those hopes. It is possible that maybe Mr. Modi, if he becomes the Prime Minister with the stable majority that the exit polls are predicting, could chart a new beginning in several old issues that have stuck this economy in a rut of 5% growth for the past 2 years. Well, all of you, thank you very much for joining me in this encouraging and enthusiastic discussion.